All right, the second edition of 15 Off the Field is Mike Mutnansky, who just spent a good 45 minutes talking Patriots, Dynasty, and a little bit of beer at the end. But today we are going to pivot after Jeff Howe took us inside the life of an NFL insider. You are going to take us inside the Boston sports media market, which, well, okay, you're laughing at me. But here's the deal, right? Like giving yourself credit in the longevity of your career and the context you have and the understanding not only just of, radio life, I think the temperature that you're able to take on the fan base and the dynamics of it all, right? Where things have shifted, are shifting next. What I want to know off the top, and I want you to run with this from here as far as the future of what the market and specifically sports media might look like. What have you gained in the last 14 months writing about this arena with a new perspective and understanding you've only gained by kind of stepping outside of it and now focusing more of your effort and attention on what the sports media scene is here in Boston? What do you know now?
Again, if any of this comes across, I know nothing. Okay, I'm a fan like you guys are. I like sports. I like media. I like gossip.
Why am I having you on? You know stuff.
I'm just prefacing it by saying, like, I'm just like everyone else. I'm a fan, and I now consume this stuff. Like I was in it for X amount of years, and now I'm in it in a different way and sort of consume it like you folks do on my radio, on my podcast, on my TV. I would say specifically two things that stand out to me the last year plus. First and foremost is like I think now I can tell, Callahan, when someone is just faking it and someone is passionate about what they're talking about. And why that's important is because when I was growing up, you had ESPN, you had Nesson, you had it wasn't even NBC Sports Boston, it was Sports Channel back then. Basically limited outlets for where you got your sports. And so it was one sports station. It was just WEEI. And so you were sort of stuck with that. Okay. You were listening to Dale and Eddie, whether you liked that some hockey guest was on or not. Okay. You were listening to the big show, no matter if you liked the co-host that day or not. Dennis and Callahan, you're listening to growing up because that was the show that was on in the morning. That doesn't exist anymore. Like there are a million options everywhere between podcast, YouTube, TikTok, now one huge sports radio station in Boston, which we can get to, multiple TV outlets, message boards, Discord, social media. You can get it anywhere. And so to me, if you are doing it on a huge platform, you better really be passionate about it, where it comes across to me as a listener, like, oh, this guy cares about this. He's into it. He's committed to it. Or you better be entertaining. If you're just doing it to do it, I think I can tell and the listener can tell, and there are more options than ever to now change the channel and find something else. So I look back at things that I did. I did hours of segments where I was doing it just to do it. And, if not that I could change it, but looking back on it, I feel like that was a mistake. I feel like I would have, there are times where I could have made it more entertaining or just not talked about the subject because I thought, okay, that's what you had to talk about at that time. And so like that to me is the biggest thing, is that when I listen and consume it now, like I can get experts on almost anything. Like if you use sports betting as an example, I think there are times where people are talking about sports betting on the radio in Boston. They're doing it because they think they're supposed to do it. And it comes across as a listener pretty poorly. Like I can go get sports betting experts anywhere I want to. That's all they do. And so don't just do it to do it. I think I hear that and see that more than I did when I was in it. Does that make any sense?
It does. I have steered away basically since I came into the market and started working here from listening to talk radio. It's not because those folks aren't good at what they do. It's not because I didn't love every second of it, growing up in Connecticut, moving back to Massachusetts here for a little bit. It's just, part of it is work. Part of it is I have other interests, and that illuminates me or entertains me in my way listening to more national shows or more NBA talk or certain fantasy baseball specific things. My interest rather than what I see as work. Where
you can now find those anywhere. You don't. That goes back to the original point. Like you don't have to go to the Boston TV or Boston radio stations to get what you want as a consumer, because now there's so much more available to you. It's so fractured. Like it's fractured, specialized. You can find what you want. You're not now stuck with whatever. And by the way, there's still people that will just leave their station on the TV or the radio, whatever was on the night before. But I think it's the audience is getting younger and have now grown up with this. It is now, this is the second point, is easy than ever to move on from what you're watching or listening to and go, no, I can find 50,000 other things. Sports on TV is seeing this because people are on their phones while they're watching a live event. Like you were at the Celtics game. You're covering the Celtics game on Thursday night or Wednesday night. I'm at home and I'm watching it, but I'm also on my phone. And it's become so fractured. You better catch me with what you're talking about. You better find a way to hook me in, because at my fingertips, there is something that I can scroll to get that fix immediately. If what you're doing, what you're talking about, whatever segment it is, TV, radio, is not something I'm interested in.
Okay, so what's next? Because I think baked into there's a wider menu, and you can go pick and choose whatever you want. The information, the entertainment, a combination of the two, a lower temperature show, a constant spitfire of hot takes and anger and simplistic cynicism, which is a different topic. But like, where is this going next? Specific to this market in the media, what do you think is going to draw a larger audience that hasn't already?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think there was for a long time, the suggestion that it was a market for like 3 sports talk stations, that you could have a third. And at time you did with 1510, the Zone, EEI, and the Sports Hub. We're now close than ever to like a one sports talk city. If you go by the Nielsen ratings, which are not perfect, I admit that, but the Nielsen ratings suggest that on a 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 times ratio, people are listening to the Sports Hub versus WEEI. And I'll be curious in the next year or so if there's any change to that, because it's been a pretty historic gap between the two stations now for a while. The football season got a little bit closer, but you're seeing now with some of the weeklies and monthlies that have come out for winter, where the Sports Hub again is extending their lead. And this happens in other markets, like in New York, for example. FAN is way up here, and ESPN Radio is way down here. Same thing in Philadelphia, where you have WIP and you have WPEN, which is the Fanatic. I always thought they'd be sort of close back and forth, the EI and the Sports Hub. As someone who worked there, was in those battles for their worth for a long time. The gap's pretty wide now, and I don't know if that's going to be sustainable based on the Nielsen ratings long term, and based on the parent company for EI, Odyssey, just sold off through bankruptcy, and they have new owners now. George Soros, who's very much into political talk on one side of the aisle. He's now involved as like the major owner of these stations. What does that mean for all these stations across the country? Specifically sports talk, and specifically in a market where you're being dominated by the other. Does that open the door for a third station to come in and say, well, we can split EEI in half and do pretty well and make some money there? Does that tell people that there's only a one sports talk station now? That's something I think worth watching for the next 12 or 18 months, how that battle plays out. It's not really a battle right now. It's very lopsided. But is there any change in the temperature there? Is there anything that will happen either financially or with the rating side of it that will change that? Because right now it's a one-sided story, quite frankly.
It really is. And look, if I'm being honest, you could say the same thing about the Globe and the Herald, right? And that's due to a variety of factors, I think, outside of the control of folks like me who work on the editorial side and the writers, but the circulation numbers are what they are. There's still a brand equity to WEI or the Herald, or certainly the Globe or 98.5. But in the same vein, again, with the menu of options, people can make their own decisions for themselves, not only what they want, but also how good they think it is. Lord knows there are plenty of those people on Twitter and in my mentions about how good or bad things are that we produce. I would say this on the whole, and this is part of the reason we launched this YouTube channel here, is I think this is where things have pivoted. I think this is where they continue to pivot. I mentioned McAfee earlier, the rise of his show strictly through YouTube. I don't do it. I don't get it. If I want to listen to a podcast, it's just going to be an audio medium for me. But people will watch these. Our numbers are great on YouTube. And I appreciate everyone who listens. I'm curious who makes that pivot fastest. Because, yes, I think it will be lopsided 98.5 and EEI if we're looking at sports talk stations. Who can master or get ahead in the way that podcasters want the advantage now to? Who's going to have the bigger YouTube presence and draw that audience and drive it and make everything into smaller bites? Because I don't care where you look in general media or sports media, that's where things are. And I think they will be for a little while. So whether that's up to, the managers of the stations or the producers, I don't know. But I think that is going to be a big pivot point for who can kind of stay a step ahead in the way that, they're good now, but we know the fall of EEI as it is came from just kind of being content and complacent. And that's true in any business, adapt or die.
Yeah, and I as someone who it's more a question for you. Like, so you write in a long form, and I guess now with mutstack.com, it's more of a long form medium, at least on Fridays. Do you see a transition there? Do you sense the appetite for, like, as the audiences, you grow up now with this fractured thing, right? You see kids now in their teens grew up with the internet. Like, is there just less of an app? They just want it in bites. Do you get a sense that that's where it's going, in everything, in
I
everything?
thought our conversation where you mentioned New Balance was going to be the oldest sounding conversation we had. You know, like you've got this near analogy, and here we are. These kids have got the internet in their pocket.
No, but
True
it's,
story
forget
though.
the internet. It's just how about smaller portions then? How
No,
about
no,
smaller
you're
bites of
absolutely
it
right.
versus the big
I
meat?
have felt my own personal attention span over the last 10 years, which granted was not great to begin with, shrink and shrink and shrink and become honestly detrimental to some parts of like my working life until it's deadline and I have this juice and energy and I just have to do it. And that's, I think, a function of constantly being on Twitter, part for work, part because that's a good news source for me. And so for kids who grow up with that, when your brain is still, so spongy and being formed, like, yes, I don't see a world in which you pivot back to things that take longer, or are more long form. That said, Wright Thompson drops this epic on Caitlin Clark for ESPN, and I'm sure that has been one of the most, if not the most, read story for them this year, as was his Tiger Woods epic in reporting on there. So there's still a place for it. But yeah, I think who can master the bite size, where the audience is now, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Like, I don't see the brand names that we've mentioned fully jumping in there yet. And whoever does, I think, will at least gain a leg up for the next few years.
And I've said this for a couple of years now, and I'm not first to say it, and maybe we're years and years away from this, but there will be a point, and maybe there is now. Like, I still drive a Toyota Camry, much respect, but there are going to be cars where, like, and I've seen YouTube videos, ironically, where they show you how to do this, like to mount your tablet or mount your TV screen right there, and you're streaming right in your car. And
Yeah.
so, how does that affect all of this going forward, specifically sports talk radio? If I don't have to stick with like, it's happening already with phones. People are just putting their Bluetooth on and watching them on their phones, hopefully not where they're driving, but that's going to have an impact too. And so I wonder how that will play out over the next 5 or 10 years as that becomes more consumable on the go. And I suspect at some point, the connections there are places now where it feels like it's wired connection no matter where you are. That will only get better. And so that changes it too. Like, you're not forced to watch on a certain medium because you can get whatever you want on your phone, tablet, even in your car, which is going to have an impact on all this stuff, quite frankly.
Right. And, those aren't 10 to 15-second clips in your car because you have to pay attention at least for 10 to 15-second spurts, I would hope, as you're driving. But I think the point, whether you're doing long form stuff or you're making a video or you're doing a radio show, is ideally to go viral in some sort of clip. And video goes viral in those smaller mediums that we're talking about, because it's the report or it's the take. Like, Mike Giardi last week or 2 weeks ago going nuts about free agency or saying they ran it back, like, did incredible numbers for one particular tweet that I had that had nothing attached to it. And so it's whether you're in the car, or you're walking the dog, like I don't know. The value in it is how much you can, again, you talk about going viral, like, multiply the views and the impact of that. Make it more accessible in many different ways, whether it's YouTube or it's audio or it's a small video clip that can be repurposed in a number of different ways. Take the content you have and be able to multiply it. Where you did a show once a day on FM, you did it and it was out. That's gone. Now the money is made by the views on YouTube, the podcast, the clips that come out of it. And again, I think that's kind of part of what you're talking, making it more
And I would say
accessible.
the direction whole is very good for anyone who, I think it's good for the consumer because you have more choices, right? Maybe it's a different format than you used to, but there are more choices now. Okay. There are more options for you. That is always good. It's also good for guys like you and me because you're seeing it now. You don't have to be tied to a legacy media company to be able to be out there and be able to be successful. Like that, I think that's a very important thing. For a long time, you had to work for X company to be. It doesn't exist that way anymore because of the way things are now out there and go viral. You can create that on your own, which should be, if you're in the business, like the business, want to be in the business. To me, that's a good thing because the path, growing up, the path was like, go work for this radio station, this newspaper, this TV station, intern there, start there at the bottom, work your way up. Doesn't work like that anymore. Like, and I think that is good for the consumer, but it's also good for professionals who can forge their own path now. And you're seeing that over and over and over again, not having to be tied to those companies and be able to do your own thing, which I think is very good.
Yeah, it's good for the content, creates more menu
Yeah,
options. And we've come full circle. All right, this has been two middle-aged white guys talking about the state media and what's next when you have the internet in your pocket.
I warned you people. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy who likes to yap about this stuff and occasionally write about it.
True story, and we'll get out with this because again, I say it's 15 off the field. I think this is just going to have to be a lie. This is the second time it's gone way longer. 2016, I was covering a mix of high school sports, D3, Penn State part-time. No, excuse me, 2015. And so I made a little extra money because I was making $28,000 a year, substitute teaching. Nice. And one of the last lessons that I had where I would say, okay, you guys are good for every part of the class. I'll give you the last 5 to 10. We can just hang out. You don't have to do anything stressful. Was something about the internet. And so I'm standing there in front of the class. I'm like, well, believe it or not, like when I was growing up, and I was like 25, 26, you would have to wait a minute. No one else could be on the phone. And then it made this sound. And I did the dial-up noise in front of this class of 7th graders who all dropped their jaws and stared at me like they had seen a ghost, being like, who is this crazy MFer making these sounds I've never heard of and never want to hear again to explain how the internet came about in his day and age? Get out of here, loser. And I just stopped and was like, yeah, you guys got it pretty good. Okay, class dismissed. So lesson learned. If you're going to substitute teach, no need to simulate dial-up in front of an audience.
Well, that being said, like I would come back and do 15 more minutes of like what it was like and tell war stories of like you used to get like a CD in the mail for America Online, and that would have a certain amount of hours you could use it. Once that was gone, you couldn't use it anymore. Or like you said, God forbid, you're on the internet, mom's with the phone, and now you're in the Stats Inc. chat room and your baseball stats chat is gone because mom picked up her phone. These are things we should be doing 15 minutes on, not my terrible media takes.
Well, that being said, read him, subscribe. It's free.
Yes.
The Mutstack, sports media, Patriots, Red Sox, Celtics, Nuggets, thoughts, gambling, horse racing, all the good stuff. I've taken way more of your time than I promised. Thank you, sir, for delivering as always. And I will call you back, not when I'm in need, but when you come up again in the rotation. All right?
Anytime, man. I appreciate it. You can subscribe for free at mutstack.com, and no more dial-up talk. I promise.
You got it. You're the best.